You've probably noticed him, the guy sitting alone at the restaurant, completely comfortable, not checking his phone every 30 seconds or looking around nervously for validation. While most men would rather eat terrible food with company than enjoy a great meal in solitude, this man has discovered something that Friedrich Nietzsche understood over a century ago. True strength comes from being genuinely comfortable with yourself. What you're about to learn will challenge everything you've been told about solitude, social expectations, and what it really means to be a confident man in today's world. Picture this: you walk into a restaurant, ask for a table for one, and sit down without checking your phone or looking around nervously for approval. In that moment, you've just demonstrated something most men will never understand: the raw power of being completely comfortable with yourself. Nietzsche called this type of person the Übermensch, the one who has transcended the need for constant social validation and has found strength in his own presence. When you eat alone confidently, you're not just having a meal. You're making a statement about your relationship with solitude and your independence from the herd. The restaurant becomes your testing ground, a place where your inner strength gets measured not by how loud you can be or how many people surround you, but by how calmly you can exist in your own space. Most men panic at the thought of being seen alone because they've been conditioned to believe that solitude equals loneliness, that eating alone means you're somehow deficient or unwanted. But Nietzsche understood that the truly powerful man is the one who can stand alone, who doesn't need the constant chatter and validation of others to feel worthy. Your ability to sit with yourself, to enjoy your own thoughts and presence, reveals a psychological strength that the crowd-dependent man will never possess. This isn't about being antisocial or rejecting human connection. It's about having such a solid foundation within yourself that you don't crumble when external support isn't available. The man who eats alone confidently has learned one of life's most crucial lessons. Your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship you'll ever have. When you can enjoy your own company, when you can sit in silence without discomfort, you've accessed a source of power that makes you independent from the emotional needs and opinions of others. This is the mark of the truly self-reliant man, the one who has begun his journey toward becoming his own master. Society has created an invisible rule book that dictates eating alone is somehow wrong or shameful, but Nietzsche taught us to question these arbitrary moral judgments that keep us trapped in mediocrity. When you choose to dine alone, you're stepping beyond the conventional ideas of what's considered normal or acceptable social behavior. The uncomfortable stares and whispered comments from other diners aren't reflections of your worth. They're projections of their own insecurities and inability to break free from social conditioning. Nietzsche would see this as the perfect example of how the masses use shame and judgment to keep individuals from rising above the herd mentality. The truth is that there's nothing inherently good or bad about eating alone. These are simply values imposed by a society that profits from your insecurity and need for constant companionship. Restaurants want you to bring friends because it means more orders and higher profits. Social media has convinced you that every meal needs to be shared and photographed to have value. But the man who eats alone has transcended these manufactured needs and has chosen to create his own values based on what actually serves his growth and peace of mind. Breaking free from these judgments requires what Nietzsche called the courage to be immoral by society's standards while being true to your authentic self. When you sit alone at that restaurant table, you're not just eating, you're declaring your independence from the need to conform to others' expectations. You're choosing personal freedom over social acceptance, and that choice makes you dangerous to a system that depends on your insecurity and need for approval to function properly. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself and your environment through inner strength and self-direction. When you eat alone with confidence, you're exercising this fundamental drive by refusing to let social anxiety or the fear of judgment control your actions. Every time you choose solitude over the safety of the crowd, you're building what Nietzsche would call your personal power, the ability to act according to your own will, rather than being driven by external pressures or expectations. This inner authority develops through repeated acts of self-reliance and independence. The man who can sit comfortably alone in public spaces has trained himself to be his own source of validation and entertainment. He doesn't need constant stimulation or approval from others, because he has cultivated an internal sense of purpose and direction. The psychological independence becomes the foundation for all other forms of power in his life, professional, romantic, and social. When you don't need others to feel complete, you interact with them from a position of strength rather than desperation. The will to power manifests in your ability to make decisions based on your authentic desires rather than what others expect or approve of. Eating alone becomes a practice in asserting your individual will against the collective pressure to conform. Each solo meal is a small victory over the part of you that wants to hide, to blend in, to avoid standing out. This daily practice of choosing authenticity over acceptance builds the psychological muscle you need to live life on your own terms in all areas. Amor fati. Nietzsche's concept of loving your fate means accepting and embracing every aspect of your life, including the moments of solitude that others might see as unfortunate or lonely. When you eat alone, you're not just tolerating the situation, you're actively choosing to love this moment of independence and self-connection. This isn't about making the best of a bad situation. It's about recognizing that your ability to be alone is actually one of your greatest strengths and something to be celebrated rather than hidden or apologized for. The man who has mastered amor fati doesn't eat alone because he has no other options. He eats alone because he genuinely enjoys his own company and values the peace and clarity that solitude brings. He has learned to appreciate the luxury of being able to think his own thoughts, to eat at his own pace, and to exist without having to manage other people's emotions or expectations. This isn't selfishness, it's self-love in its purest form. When you can truly enjoy being with yourself, you become less needy and more attractive to others because you're operating from abundance rather than scarcity. Loving your fate means understanding that your moments of solitude are not accidents or failures, but necessary parts of your development. As a complete individual, the restaurant becomes a sanctuary where you can practice this self-acceptance and strengthen your relationship with the most important person in your life. This love of solitude creates an inner stability that no external circumstance can shake, making you truly unbreakable in a world that constantly tries to destabilize your peace. Nietzsche observed that most people live like sheep, constantly seeking the safety and validation of the herd because they lack the courage to stand as individuals. The fear of eating alone perfectly illustrates this herd mentality. Men would rather eat bad food with company than enjoy a great meal in solitude, because they've been programmed to believe that being alone means being rejected or unwanted. This fear isn't rational. It's a deeply ingrained social conditioning that keeps men dependent on others for their sense of worth and identity. The herd feels threatened by the individual who can function independently because his self-sufficiency exposes their own weakness and dependency. When other men see you eating alone confidently, they experience a mixture of envy and confusion because you're demonstrating a level of self-reliance they haven't achieved. Their discomfort with your solitude is really discomfort with their own inability to be alone with themselves. They need constant distraction and companionship because they've never developed an internal sense of purpose or peace that can sustain them through quiet moments. This herd mentality creates a cycle where men avoid solitude, never develop comfort with themselves, and become increasingly dependent on external validation and entertainment. They fill their lives with noise, activity, and people not because they genuinely enjoy these things, but because silence and solitude force them to confront parts of themselves they'd rather avoid. The man who breaks free from this pattern and learns to enjoy his own company has taken the first step toward true independence and psychological maturity that the herd will never understand or achieve. Nietzsche believed that the highest form of human development comes when you stop living by other people's values and create your own moral code based on your authentic experience and wisdom. The man who eats alone confidently has begun this process of value creation because he's decided that his comfort and peace matter more than society's opinion about how meals should be consumed. He's not rebelling against social norms out of spite. He's transcending them because he's discovered something more valuable than acceptance. Genuine self-respect and inner authority. Creating your own values means you stop measuring your worth by external metrics like how many friends you have dinner with or how socially active you appear to others. Instead, you develop internal standards based on what actually contributes to your growth, happiness, and sense of purpose. The solo diner has learned that a peaceful meal where he can think clearly and enjoy his food is more valuable than a chaotic dinner surrounded by people he doesn't genuinely connect with. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's intelligent self-care and priority setting. When you operate from your own value system rather than society's expectations, you become immune to the manipulation and control that others try to exert through shame and social pressure. You can't be guilted into doing things that don't serve you, and you can't be made to feel inadequate for choices that bring you genuine satisfaction. The psychological independence is what Nietzsche saw as the foundation of true strength, the ability to live according to your own carefully considered principles, rather than the random opinions and judgments of the crowd around you. Nietzsche's concept of eternal return asks you to imagine living your life exactly as it is, with all its moments, infinite times over, applied to eating alone. This becomes a powerful test. If you had to repeat this exact moment of solitude forever, would you embrace it or run from it? The man who eats alone confidently has already answered this question. He's chosen to love this moment so completely that repeating it eternally wouldn't be a punishment, but a gift. This isn't about settling for less. It's about finding such genuine peace in your own company that you'd choose it again and again. Most men fail this test because they're eating alone out of circumstance rather than choice, viewing it as something to endure rather than enjoy. They're mentally somewhere else, wishing they were with friends or scrolling through their phones to avoid being present with themselves. But the man who has mastered solitude treats each solo meal as an opportunity to connect with his thoughts, to appreciate his food, and to practice the art of being completely present with himself. He's not waiting for his real life to start when other people arrive. This is his real life, and he's fully engaged with it. The eternal return teaches you to live each moment so authentically that you'd gladly experience it forever. When you can sit alone at a restaurant and feel genuinely grateful for the peace, the clarity, and the freedom that solitude provides, you've passed one of life's most important tests. You've learned to create meaning and joy from within rather than depending on external circumstances. To make your life worth living, Nietzsche distinguished between master morality, which comes from strength and self-determination, and slave morality, which develops from weakness and resentment. The man who eats alone confidently embodies master morality because his actions stem from personal choice and inner strength rather than fear or social obligation. He defines what's good based on what serves his growth and peace, not what others expect or approve of. His solitude is an expression of power, the power to be content with himself and to act according to his authentic desires, rather than external pressures. In contrast, the man who can't eat alone operates from slave morality, where his actions are driven by fear of judgment and need for approval. He avoids solitude not because he genuinely prefers company, but because he's afraid of what others might think if they see him alone. His social behavior isn't chosen from strength, but compelled by weakness, the weakness of having no solid relationship with himself. He needs constant validation from others because he's never learned to validate himself, making him dependent on the very people whose opinions shouldn't matter. The master creates his own standards and lives by them regardless of social pressure, while the slave lives in reaction to others' expectations and judgments. When you choose to eat alone because you genuinely enjoy the experience, you're exercising master morality. You're acting from abundance rather than scarcity. This independence makes you dangerous to those who operate from slave morality because your self-sufficiency exposes their dependency and challenges their belief that happiness comes from external sources rather than internal strength and self-acceptance. Nietzsche's famous directive to become who you are requires periods of solitude, where you can strip away social masks and connect with your authentic self. When you eat alone regularly, you create space for this essential self-discovery process because you're not performing for others or managing their expectations and emotions. In these quiet moments, You can hear your own thoughts clearly, understand your genuine preferences, and develop a relationship with the person you actually are rather than the person you think you should be. This isn't narcissism. It's the necessary work of self-knowledge that most people avoid their entire lives. The restaurant becomes a laboratory for authenticity where you can practice being yourself without the influence of others' personalities, opinions, or energy. You discover what you actually like to eat when no one is judging your choices, how you prefer to spend your time when you're not entertaining others, and what thoughts naturally rise when you're not responding to constant social stimulation. These insights are crucial for developing genuine confidence and making life decisions that align with your true nature rather than social expectations or peer pressure. Most men never become who they really are because they never spend enough time alone to discover their authentic selves. They live their entire lives as reactions to other people, never developing an independent sense of identity or purpose. The man who can eat alone comfortably has taken the first step towards self-mastery because he's willing to face himself honestly and develop a genuine relationship with his own mind, desires, and potential. Nietzsche understood that truly independent individuals pose a threat to systems built on dependency and conformity. The man who eats alone confidently represents something dangerous to the established order because he demonstrates that happiness and fulfillment don't require constant consumption, social validation, or adherence to prescribed social rituals. He's living proof that you can be complete without needing what society insists you must have. And this threatens entire industries built on manufacturing insecurity and artificial needs. His contentment in solitude makes him harder to control, manipulate, and exploit. When you don't need others' approval to feel good about yourself, you become immune to the social pressures that keep most men trapped in cycles of spending, status-seeking, and people-pleasing. You can't be shamed into buying things you don't need, attending events that drain your energy, or maintaining relationships that don't serve your growth. This independence makes you unpredictable and uncontrollable, which is exactly what makes you dangerous to a system that profits from your insecurities and dependencies. The confident solo diner has opted out of the game entirely. Society fears the self-sufficient man because he proves that their rules are optional and their judgments are powerless over someone who has developed genuine self-respect. He's not rebelling against the system, he's simply indifferent to it, which is far more threatening than active resistance. When you can sit alone peacefully while others frantically seek distraction and validation, you've achieved a level of psychological freedom that makes you truly ungovernable. This is why your simple act of eating alone makes others so uncomfortable. The man who eats alone confidently has mastered one of life's most essential skills, the ability to be genuinely comfortable with himself through Nietzsche's lens. We see that this isn't just about dining, it's about developing the psychological strength to live authentically in a world that constantly tries to make you dependent on external validation. Every solo meal becomes practice for the larger challenge of living life on your own terms, creating your own values, and finding fulfillment from within rather than from the opinions and presence of others. This is the path toward becoming who you truly are rather than who society expects you to be. But here's the question that will determine everything. Are you brave enough to sit with yourself long enough to discover who that person actually is, or will you keep hiding in the crowd, never knowing your own strength? If this resonates with you and you want to continue exploring what it means to live as an authentic, self-determined man, subscribe to the channel and join the conversation in the comments below.